So we are in Tampa, Florida for Turning Point USA's annual Student Action Summit, and we're talking to Jack Posobiec. And you have some interesting comments about what Mike Pence is up to.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Alana. So the main thing that I've heard, so in Washington, D.C., we saw in July, right, dueling events almost. So Heritage has their big meeting. That is keynoted by Pence. The very next day, America First Institute has their summit keynoted by President Trump. This is the first time, by the way, Trump has returned to D.C. since leaving the presidency. We're also, and this comes right on the same heels of them going toe-to-toe, essentially, in this proxy war almost, that Matt Boyle at Breitbart has been so well in describing. Though I do think I actually said proxy war first on the podcast. I'm just saying. I think I was technically first, but no, Matt's actually done a great job of explaining all that out and laying it out, how it's become this proxy war between Trump and sort of the MAGA movement on one side, and then the establishment with Pence on the other side with Robeson versus Kerry Lake. And that's all going down. Meanwhile, Pence, he's not just out there for this meeting at Heritage, this summit, and this keynote speech. He's holding meetings. I've been told that he is sitting down with influential conservatives in order to potentially discuss floating some of the ideas for a Pence 2024 campaign, a campaign for President of the United States with Mike Pence. And I think, obviously, this would be a huge news. It would come on the heels, the timing-wise, of the January 6th committee hearings, where, of course, Pence is playing a very massive role in them. Where was he? What time was he here? What was he informed? What was President Trump informed of at the time? And so the question, of course, for myself, with my political analyst hat on, is will he be trying to align himself with the Kinzingers, the Liz Cheneys of the world, use this narrative, or potentially just some of the narrative, to go back to essentially using the establishment, being a vehicle for the establishment to reassert themselves and their authority, which they previously had all the authority over the conservative movement and over the Republican Party. It was Trump, it was Trumpism, it was the MAGA movement that came in and completely upended all of that. And that's what we're seeing, these rifts, not only between left and right in America, but between this populist uprising, populist wing of the party, and the establishment wing of the party. Because even though the voters, the people, they're on the popular side. Believe me, we're here at Turning Point right now, we're here at SAS. You got 5,000 people in this room. 90% of them, by the way, under 25, okay? That's just one event. There's gonna be another event in December, America Fest, where it's gonna be 2 or even 3 times as big as this one. That's actually the now flagship event. And so you're seeing this energy, you're seeing this movement, definitely a vehicle of the populist right, but at the same time, the establishment is still very, very well endowed, extremely well funded, and they have the ability to go up in media, to go up in TV, so they could potentially put forward a very strong primary challenge, something that would be almost, I want to say, unheard of, certainly in the modern era of politics, to have a former sitting vice president challenging his own former president in an open primary. And meanwhile, at the same time, you're hearing noise out of the Nikki Haley camp, somewhat of the Governor Kristi Noem camp, talking about potentially running, though I actually think those are more of the kind of campaigns where somebody runs because they want to be vice president. And so I think that's really more what that's about. And then, of course, we're here in Florida, so you have to mention Ron DeSantis. That's kind of the big willy won't-he right now. And even though I know that there's a lot of people around him, saying, Ron, go for it, you can do it. Elon Musk, of course, came in, said, go for it. Joe Rogan putting it in. Still not getting the sense, and I heard him speak last night, and I'm still not quite getting the sense that he's leaning in that direction yet. I was paying very close attention to his comments, talked about 2022, and he really talked about Florida. He talked about all the work he wants to get done in Florida. He talked about the fights he's having with Disney, of course, probably the largest and most influential company in Florida. And so going toe-to-toe with them, that's a big issue for Florida. You didn't really hear much about Ron DeSantis talk about, and when a president or a candidate, potential candidate, whether it's a senator, whether it's a governor, whether it's Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, wants to run for president, you start to hear them talk more in these national terms. They'll start throwing in, talking about California, talking about what's going on in New York. They'll bring up other states. They'll bring up the mood of the nation. You didn't hear any of that from DeSantis last night. And so if I had to bet, I would bet against it as of right now.
Yeah, and plus it'd probably make Floridians mad too to lose their governor like that.
Well, I mean, he's the best governor in, and I think I just saw Rick Scott walking around. So no offense to it's the former governor Rick Scott, now senator, but you really have to say what Ron DeSantis broke the mold of what it means to be a governor. He really did, and this is the first time that you've seen an actual, almost like an activist governor, a populist nationalist, who is not afraid to use the power of the governor's office, to use the power of government to achieve his goals, to achieve his ends. Now, in some cases, that means working with, by the way, the companies here in Florida. Publix, Florida's largest supermarket chain, and they went after him so hard for working with them when it came to vaccines and testing and all the stuff. And they said, well, Publix has donated money to Ron DeSantis, and that's clearly why he's doing that. And whereas Ron pointed out, well, they've got the most locations in the state. Why wouldn't I use them? It's the most convenient thing for the people that live here. What, I'm going to go and set up these, National Guard sites? No, work with what you have on the ground. So he's shown that he can work with companies when it makes sense. But at the same time, when you've got Disney that's going out there attacking the anti-groomer bill that Ron DeSantis put in, first in the nation, that is preventing this essentially grooming ideology from being injected into classrooms for little kids. I've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. I don't want to talk to them about stuff, that sort of stuff. They should be learning about reading, writing, grammar, numbers. That's what you learn when you're those ages, right? That's not a discussion for the classroom, and frankly, that shouldn't ever be something that is introduced to children, right? Because you're sexualizing children. Yet Disney, for whatever reason, decided that they wanted to take a stand against this, and this is when you saw that turning point, that Ron DeSantis realized that he does have power beyond simply throwing around press releases or making statements on Twitter. He actually went to the Florida legislature and said, let's take away their tax breaks. Let's take away all the goodies that we've given to Disney for all these years. Let's turn it back on its head and say, no, we are not going to allow them to have all the things that they had before. If they are going to step into the political arena, they will be fought in the political arena, and we're going to do just that.
Yeah, and he does seem to be making a lot of those powerful moves, and it seems almost unheard of. Like, a lot of governors don't usually do that kind of stuff. So do you think that it's going to spark any, do you think that DeSantis will spark any kind of people?
I want Governor DeSantis to set up like a training camp, and we should make all the Republican governors go and just spend a day in Tallahassee, just shadow him. Maybe you do one at a time, I don't know. And they go in there and they just see how he does it, and then they can go back, because look at these border governors. Where's the National Guard on our border? Just do it. Right? Just do it. Stop thinking, stop talking about it. Oh, we have a border crisis. Oh, we have a border crisis. You're the governor. You're the governor of the state. If you've got a border that's that porous, call them in Arizona, Texas. Just do it. Get it under control. That's your state. Look, Uvalde, the situation in Uvalde, the story that came out of that, and we talk about the cowardice and the dysfunction of the police down in Uvalde. But you know what they don't talk about? They don't talk about the fact that that school, just this year alone, prior to the shooting, had 47 different lockdowns. Why were the lockdowns done? And I'm reading this report. The lockdowns were done because of bailouts. So what's a bailout? Well, a bailout is when illegal aliens are crossing the border. They start being chased by either Border Patrol or local police. They then crash the car somewhere in the town. They bail out, get it, bail out. They bail out of the car, and then they start racing across the schools, the community. They're going down Main Street. They're going into residential areas. Sometimes they're armed, right? Because you've got these coyotes. These are, by the way, a human trafficker as part of a human smuggling operation. So they're going through doing all this, and they have to put the school on lockdown. That school is on lockdown 47 times. And because maybe people don't realize, I don't realize, I'm not from Texas, believe me, I'm from Pennsylvania. And so I looked at the geography down there. Uvalde lies at the intersection of the two corridors, the two main corridors of human trafficking across from where? Del Rio and Eagle Pass. If you draw a line between the two of them, where do you hit? Uvalde. And that's just one border town, one school. And one of the reasons that the officers were somewhat lackadaisical in the initial response was because they thought the lockdown was because it was another one of these illegal alien situations. Think about that for a second. A school on lockdown 47 times, and we didn't talk about it because those aren't the stories that come up in the mainstream media. And yet this killer, and I don't know if that entered into his his thought process at all, but he was able to exploit that and exploit the fact that the police weren't trained for this situation. They were trained for the illegal alien stuff. That's what they were seeing. That's just one town. That's one border town of one school, right? That's going on across, because I talked to Carrie Lake about this as well. She said, we're seeing the same thing in Arizona. Lockdown after lockdown in these schools, in these border schools. And so just turning it back on its head, right? You go to Ron DeSantis. He tells you, use the power that you have. Use the power of the governor's mansion, the power of the governor's pen. Whether that's fighting back against Disney so that your schools can be safe from groomer ideology, or it's calling in the National Guard because your cities are going up in flames because of BLM and Antifa, or your border's out of control. Just use the powers that are given to you. And don't care what CNN, the New York Times, or the Washington Post is going to say about it. Guess what? They hate you already. They declared war on Republicans and conservatives and normal Americans a long, long time ago. So if you don't understand that, and yet you spend all your time trying to get these outlets to love you, you are always going to fail, because guess what? They've already won.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And segueing back to being a parent of young children, this non-binary gender fluidity concept, I mean, it's everywhere. You see it in the schools, you see it in
it's YouTube.
Entertainment.
Do you know about this? No.
And YouTube?
Let me tell you. Okay.
All right.
So we've got little kids, right? And so they have YouTube Kids, they have Netflix for kids, whatever. And of course, my 4-year-old, he's like, baby Einstein over here. He figures out he can work YouTube, he can work a tablet, he can get my phone, and if I didn't have the password on there, he would get to the point where he would have YouTube up and he could start using it, because he's already figured this all out. We have a Roku, he's already figured the entire thing out. So unless I have that thing on lockdown, which, by the way, I can control if the Wi-Fi is going to the Roku from my phone, so boom, turn that off. But he will go and choose, right? Because YouTube, the algorithm feeds you stuff. They're feeding you the next show. So he might see something that he likes, Alpha Blocks, Number Blocks. These are a couple of shows he watches. Paw Patrol he likes, PJ Masks. So he's watching these different shows, and we'll take a look at it to make sure that it's, doesn't include anything like this. But there are other shows now where what they do is they introduce the non-binary character. They introduce the two mommies. They introduce the show, these relationships or these characters that they're putting in with the children to say, hey, this is normal. It's normal to have my non-binary friend. It's normal to have my transgender friend. This is, and then they just come in, they come on, and they're on in the show with you. This is already playing out right now on YouTube every day. And so now I sit there, me being me, and I say, guess what? We're not watching this channel anymore. And I'll say it to the mom, I'll go to Tanya, we'll say the same thing. We're not doing that. And we shut that down, and we make sure that if he ever goes back to it again, no. But there will come a point where either he's going to be watching something and we don't see it, or you scale that up, right? Scale that up to all the children in America. Do you think that every parent is really paying attention to what they're watching, what their kids are watching on YouTube on a regular basis? Of course not. It'd be silly to think so. And so you've got them seeing with that. Then go flip that up to you hit the teenage years now, your preteen years, 11, 12, 13. They're already on TikTok. They're already making this stuff. There's no age-appropriate filters. There's nothing like that, right? They're being bombarded with these things at a very, very, because I'm telling you, these channels that I'm talking about, they are designed for toddlers. They are designed for babies. They are designed for the youngest of children. We're not talking about grammar and higher math. We're talking about just learning how to talk, how to say mama, dada, this type of stuff. But you're being taught, and then here comes the non-binary, and they're saying it too. This is being introduced everywhere.
Yeah. And then do you think the pendulum's going to swing back to being more, are parents going to get fed up? Because there's a lot of people that I know, personally, there's a lot of parents that they're not political, and their son or daughter comes home one day and says, Mom, I'm non-binary, and they're shocked, and it's the first time they ever heard the word non-binary. There's a lot of people that are not in the political bubble. They're not in the bubble of knowing what's going on until it's too late, until their child comes home, and they're like, what is they, them? What is non-binary? A lot of people don't know what that is. And they're young parents, 30s, in their 30s, and they're wondering, what is this? Where did this come from? I got a phone call last week. Someone asking me, 35-year-old woman asking me, what is they, them? She had never heard of that before. And it's like, okay, am I in a bubble? Do I take for granted? I think that everyone knows what this stuff is, but maybe not.
No, because what you have is like I said, right? You want to throw on YouTube because you're busy, you're doing something, life is tough, and you throw and say, hey, watch YouTube for a little bit, because kids don't watch TV anymore. They watch YouTube, right? That's the biggest switch. And when I was growing up and you were growing up, we watched TV. That's what we watch, and they had standards. YouTube, it's anything goes. TikTok, it's anything goes. That's what kids are watching now, and they're injecting this stuff all across YouTube. I think, and you're seeing reports now. We saw this report. The school, 30% of the kids were somewhere on the LGBT axis. 30%. Or coming home and saying, Mom and Dad, I identify as this, I identify as that. I want to go outside and climb trees, so I must be a boy, right? The girl says. And as opposed to, no, it's just a little kid who wants to climb a tree. That's normal, actually. That's very normal function. And it's very normative behavior, by the way, for kids. And so, that being said, I do still like to climb trees. It's kind of fun. You get up high, you shake stuff around, scare everybody. But I think that you are going to have a backlash, a massive backlash to this. You'll have two things, right? You'll have the people that take their kids to the drag queen shows because they have become so indoctrinated by this false reality, false teaching, that they think that it teaches kids to be intolerant if you normalize them to this deranged sexual behavior at a very early age. That's where you get, because I'm fascinated by this. What is the psychology of a parent that would take their child to a drag show? It would be like, and by the way, I would say the exact same thing about a parent who took their kid to a strip club, right? You don't do that, obviously, right? We're not introducing that to little children. But what they're doing, it's destabilizing. It's destabilizing to them as individuals, and it's destabilizing to them at a normal age, because this has been an agenda. It has been an agenda of the Marxist left for 100 years now, to join hand in hand with sexual deviancy, what do they call it, non-traditional sexual activities, because they understand if you can destabilize someone at an early age using some of those primal, direct, base layer programming, lizard brain, natural models, that if you destabilize them there, you then turn them against their family. Because as you just said, someone came home and they said, oh, Mom, Dad, I'm non-binary, my pronouns are they, them. And then Mom and Dad say, no, that's not right. What does the kid say back? They say back, well, you're wrong, Mom and Dad. You're wrong. You don't get to tell me whatever. And then you trigger that natural rebelliousness of youth that they always have against their parents, but they're doing so along these lines, these wedge lines of gender, sexual identity for children. Now you're splitting up families, and that's how they get you. Because now you're going to go along and you're never going to listen to Mom and Dad again. You're certainly never going to listen to that priest or that pastor again. You're going to go listen to the people that affirm what it was that you were taught on YouTube, or were taught by that left-wing teacher that you had that was really cool, that you really liked, right? But told you that you were a non-binary they, them, that validated you, that gave it. And by the way, a lot of this is victim status, right? So that's the biggest switch too in schools, is that it used to be status in school used to come up because you were good at a sport, you were a top cheerleader, even academic achievement to an extent, right? I'm not going to say like the cool kids were the ones at best in math or anything, but to an extent that was a status symbol in school. Now that stuff's all gone. That's toxic masculinity, or they'll say that you're cheerleading and a sexist, misogynist practice of the patriarchy, etc. That's all gone away. You know how you get status now in school? If you want to get to the top of the pecking order, the top of the food chain in school, it's your highest victim status. So victimization, it's the inverted hierarchy. The inverted hierarchy of intersexualized victimhood status. And so, if you're straight and white, right? If you're straight and white, then you don't have any of those inherent victim statuses. And so what do you need then? Now you need, maybe I am non-binary. Oh, and now suddenly I'm not just one of those ruddy, normal, crazy people. Now I get to be one of the anointed non-binaries. Now I get to be, the gender fluid, these different things. Now these are my pronouns. And suddenly you now have attain that status in the school that you can proudly speak for. And some of these parents, I'm telling you, they will go around and say, guess what? My son came out as non-binary. And now they're talking about that with their, while they're at the club or while they're at Starbucks with their friends. My son is non-binary, just a little bit better than your son. That's where we're at. So it's got to stop. There's got to be a backlash. There will be a backlash, and we're here at Turning Point, places like Breitbart, places like what you guys do, places like Turning Point Charlie, myself, Human Events. This is what we need to be on the cusp of, and we need to be explaining this before it is too late.